All right, Krishna, everyone. This is acyuta-bhava from Nightlight Astrology, and today is Bhakti Wednesday. I am really excited to share with you a special presentation. This is the first of a four-part series that my wife Ashley is doing with one of her teachers, Rukmini Devi Dasi, a senior devotee, a senior disciple in our Bhakti Yoga lineage, on the heart of the sacred feminine. So, over the course of four interviews between now and maybe over the course of the next month or so, you'll be hearing from one of the luminaries, in my opinion, in our Bhakti Yoga tradition, and someone who has a lot of wisdom to share on not only Bhakti, but specifically the role of the goddess and women and the feminine dimension of Bhakti Yoga. So I hope that you all enjoy this very much. And with that, I will hand it over to Ashley.
Hi, everyone. This is Ashley Elenbaas with Sky House Herb School and Apothecary, and I'm so pleased to be here with you all today for our first talk in our Heart of the Sacred Feminine series. And this is a series that will shine a light on the sacred feminine in the practice of Bhakti Yoga. For those of you who are new to my channel, I'm a clinical herbalist, a mother, a lover of every single Mary Oliver poem she ever wrote, and I'm also an aspiring Bhakti yogi. On my channel, I like to share talks on herbal medicine, plant consciousness, Bhakti yoga, medicine making, and other meanderings that cross my path. In this series, The Heart of the Sacred Feminine, this was birthed from my sweet relationship with Rukmini Devi Dasi, who has been my spiritual mentor and my friend for the last 2 years. And for some context, I've been practicing yoga for over 20 years. My husband and I ran and operated a yoga studio in the DC metro area. And our yoga was really primarily asana, meditation. We led kirtan, a lot of mindfulness training. But it really wasn't until I was exposed to Bhakti yoga that my yoga practices really took on a depth that I didn't even know was possible. So I just feel so fortunate that the path of Bhakti crossed my path and that I came into association with really great teachers like Rukmini. This series really was birthed from our desire, both Rukmini and my desire, to speak and share conversations on Bhakti Yoga from the feminine perspective and really bring this ancient practice to life in a more modern context. And I really do feel, and I know Rukmini agrees, that this practice is so needed in the world today. So we really hope these talks inspire you to try on some of these practices and to adopt maybe some of the moods and even just dive into a little more inquiry about your path as a spiritual being, and that maybe some of these talks will inspire you in some way. But before we get started, I wanted to introduce you formally to Rukmini Devi Dasi and give you a little bit of background on her work. And we're going to expand upon this, but just to give you some context for what a treat you are in for and who this person is, who I am so grateful to be exploring this topic with. So Rukmini Walker, also belovedly called Rukmini Devi Dasi, is a dear woman to my heart and many people. And she is an activist in women's spiritual empowerment and interfaith dialogue. She is the founder of Urban Devi Collective. And you can find out more at urbandevi.com. And Urban Devi is based out of the Bhakti Center in New York City, where she is a member of the board of directors. Rukmini is also a member of the board of trustees of the Bhaktivedanta College in Belgium. She is a member of Sabha, a 30-person international committee that advises the governing body commission of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. She has been traversing the path of Bhakti for most of her life, living in India, Canada, and the US as one of the first disciples of Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, who first brought the path of Bhakti to the West in 1965. She is featured in the film Women of Bhakti. Rukmini writes, teaches, and leads workshops and retreats internationally. She is the mother to devoted and talented son Gauravani, a well-known kirtan musician with whom she travels with regularly. Rukmini lives now in the Washington, D.C. area, where she and her husband lead a Vaishnava, which is part of, this is the Bhakti tradition. She leads a Vaishnava Christian dialogue and a Vaishnava Muslim dialogue each year. Rukmini sees the world animated by spirit and practices an eco-bhakti, seeking truth, beauty in nature and in the world as kindred spirits. So welcome, Rukmini. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you for this very kind invitation. It's my honor. Thank you so much, Ashley.
My pleasure. So let's talk a little bit about Bhakti for those people who might be listening who maybe have never heard this word before or have seen it, but they're not really maybe sure of the depth of this practice. Can you share with our listeners what is Bhakti and anything that you feel is helpful for people who are interested in learning more about Bhakti?
Okay, thank you so much. We often hear that yoga is defined as a union, but it's really more of a linking of two individuals together. So in Bhakti, it's a joining together of our true eternal selves as eternal individuals, linking with that divine center, our source, divinity. On the path of Bhakti, we revere as the divine sacred feminine, Sri Radha, and the divine sacred masculine, Sri Krishna. So Bhakti Yoga, I would say, it's a love in action. It's a yoga of love in action. The word Bhakti comes from the Sanskrit root word bhaj, which means to share or to share in relationship. I would say Bhakti is all about relationship. It's a loving responsiveness to that inner call, inner thirst, inner hunger, inner prompting to love and to be loved for who we really are without the masks. We're all wearing masks these days, but without the masks, without the games, without the duplicity, but that call of my inner self to that original source. I would say that describes Bhakti. Bhakti is also, it's important to say that Bhakti is a descending process of grace. It's not about achieving, as it is more about receiving. It's a reciprocation or responsiveness between that grace descending down and my sincere desire to love and to serve and to reciprocate. So it's that beautiful relationship of love in action. Those are a few thoughts about what is Bhakti.
I love that. And I love the gentleness too. For someone who studied, more of an Ashtanga approach, the 8 limbs, there's a lot of restriction. There's a lot of rules and not that Bhakti doesn't have some, disciplines that one needs to take on, but there's a softness. I mean, it's almost like an innately feminine practice because it allows for so much. And, it is, I think the word softness really is what's called me and pulled me to this path.
Yeah, actually, it's so true because Bhakti is actually a feminine goddess. So the word Bhakti, I like to call Bhakti the yoga of gratefulness. How can I reciprocate the gifts that I've received from my source, and how can I share those gifts with others? But Bhakti herself is a goddess. She is the process of this love in action is expanded from the heart of Sri Radha. So Bhakti is eminently personal. It's a radical. It's a path of radical personalism, to love and be loved, to exchange love. Coming down from our divine source. I always think of that line from Shakespeare, from Merchant of Venice. The quality of mercy is not strained. It falleth as the gentle rain from heaven. So it's exactly what you were just saying, that gentleness. It is a feminine path. It's a receptive and a receiving path of grace and sharing.
Yeah. And so how did you find this path? I think when you began, you were quite young. So how did you come across Bhakti? And maybe you can share your story of coming into this practice with our listeners.
Okay. It's a bit of again, to use the word radical, it's a bit of a radical story. I was growing up in the US in a time of upheaval, a time of turmoil, and a time of revolution. And I was searching, and I was looking for something that would again resonate with my heart, with what I felt was true. And I was reading so many things, and eventually I left home when I was quite young, and I actually met my guru, Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. I met him when I was 16. And it's kind of funny because the first thing he asked me was, "But where are your parents?" Almost as though he was feeling the pain of our whole culture, feeling the pain of the parents who couldn't understand what we were doing. So yeah, I began practicing bhakti at the age of 16. And I lived and served in yoga ashrams, managed yoga ashrams in the US and Canada and in India. And that was about 25 years in different places. And then I was married, and my husband and I, at a certain point, we felt that we could serve our community more fully by opening a for-profit business. So I was inspired by the poetry of Emily Dickinson, where she talks about truth and beauty being kindred spirits. And so the idea of, we were representing small studio artists. I know the artists that you love, Ashley. So selling, studio artists, the work of the hand, jewelry and small home furnishings and things like that. So the idea was that, my idea was that beautiful work of the hand, the beauty, could be a kindred spirit to offering those profits to projects that would serve the world, women's shelters and other service projects. So we did that for about 25 years. And then I've been just, for about the last 5 years, dedicating my time wholly to this Urban Devi project, which is really my heart. And the idea is to uplift the voices of the sacred feminine, women on the path of bhakti, but women on other spiritual, devotionally inclined paths also. Because I think that the compassionate face of the goddess, that non-judgmental, compassionate face of the goddess, has always attracted people from everywhere. We have Mother Mary, and we have Kuan Yin and Tara, and so I think that people long for that acceptance of that divine mother, that divine goddess who will love me for who I am and encourage me and share her gifts of grace with me. So that's my inspiration.
Oh, that's so beautiful. And again, this is one of the reasons I feel such a connection to you, is that you're a spiritual practitioner, but you're also a woman of the world and recognizing the beauty in the world. And this is one thing about bhakti that was such a relief, is that in many yoga traditions, this idea that the material world is bad and evil and you have to renounce it and don't take joy in the material and in your senses. And, bhakti really, the path really says, this is these little artisans and these potters and jewelry makers, they're just as much a part of God, and their work is really inspired by,
Exactly.
from a deep place by God. And so we can enjoy these things and care for one another and give gifts, material gifts. And that's actually encouraged in the practice of bhakti.
I love that bhakti. I really resonate with what you're saying, because to me, bhakti is a celebration to offer that beautiful flower, to offer that beautiful, delicious, succulent fruit, to offer the song or the poem or the dance, to offer the things of this world. And what happens is, according to the philosophy of bhakti, when we can offer up the temporary things of this world, because that's a difference. Bhakti says this, yes, this world is temporary, but it's not false. So when we offer those things of this world up to divinity, they take on their eternal intrinsic quality. And another thing I love about the path of bhakti is this idea that you're really touching on right now, that nothing is in and of itself material, but the so-called material takes on the spiritual in essence of its own self when it's offered up to divinity. So I may have a little flower, I can offer it, you know, I can leave it in my garden to enjoy, or I can offer it to a lover or a friend. But if I offer that little flower up to my source, to Radha and Krishna, by any name really, then that flower takes on that its own eternal quality. And yeah, another thing that's very important, I think, is that bhakti, other yogas may be more about renunciation and gaining knowledge, and as you're saying, rejecting the things of this world. But bhakti is a celebration, and it's more about the sincerity of the heart and the desire to offer some sincere service in humility and simplicity. So that really resonates with me.
Yeah. And this idea of offering too, just to go with it a little bit. And, you know, in our home, we have an altar. And so when I prepare food, and, you know, it can be, you know, an elaborate meal, or it can just be some protein muffins I'm making for the week, you know, but when I offer that, you know, when I place that on the altar and I ring a bell and I sing, you know, a song of thanks and of acknowledgement, then that food becomes transformed into, like you're saying, into the spiritual. And then anytime I eat one of those, you know, again, it's just a protein muffin, but it's not just a protein muffin, because I've acknowledged where it came from. I've acknowledged the spiritual nature of the food that's going to serve me and my spiritual body. And it just really wakes up everything. And in the summertime, when I have flowers that I can bring in and offer, it just really alivens the material. And to me, it's, you know, like there's never, you know, everything you do can be an offering. And I really love that about this practice.
Yeah. And that's why I call bhakti the yoga of gratefulness, because it's actually, taking on that quality of giving thanks in a beautiful way, in a heartfelt way, that everything, you know, then as we always hear, we come into this world naked, we leave this world naked, but in between, we're claiming so much as mine, or, you know, this is me, or this is mine. But to recognize the intrinsic spiritual nature of myself, and to be able to offer those gifts, and to recognize also that, you know, that spiritual essence within myself and within others. It's important to recognize in the path of bhakti that that same spiritual essence is there within every living being. That we have an external dress. I may be a woman, I may be an American, I may be such and such age, or such and such race or ethnicity, but the external, the body is like a dress that I may put on or take off, and underneath is the mind, like lingerie. It's a little more subtle, you know. But the real person is inside, and that same spiritual essence is there in all living beings. So bhakti is actually a process of awakening the receptivity of the sacred feminine, not only in that object of love, Sri Radha, but in myself also. Because, and here's a key point in bhakti that's very, I think, very beautiful, that whether I am a man or a woman or whatever I am externally, my nature is actually feminine and receptive, and about that loving responsiveness. So bhakti is actually about awakening that sacred divine feminine within each of us in reciprocation to Sri Radha and Krishna, our origins and our source.
Yeah. Let's dive into the feminine in bhakti a little bit more, because I think that, you know, again, as an introduction to these talks, maybe you could talk a little bit about the goddess in bhakti. You know, who is the goddess, and can you paint us a picture of who she is, and kind of how the feminine takes shape in this practice?
Yeah. So I mentioned that bhakti is a radical personalism, and everything is a person in this spiritual consciousness. The flower is longing to be offered, and the fruit is longing to be offered. So it's a very personal path. And the goddess is Sri Radha, by many names. Some people in India worship Sitaram. We on this path of bhakti, this particular path of bhakti, we revere the divine feminine and masculine together. And I love that in tandem, the masculine and the feminine in harmony, in balance, as Radha and Krishna, by so many names also. But I love that point that the sacred feminine is there in so many cultures. Sometimes we see the sacred feminine holding weapons of chastisement, that, hey, guys, you better stay in line. But when we see Sri Radha, she's holding up a blessing hand, and she's holding a lotus in the other hand. So that blessing hand, that path of grace, this is the mood of you mentioned the word bhav. This is the bhava, or the internal ecstasy of the sacred feminine. Take my grace, take this blessing, be blessed and bless others. Be blessed to know who you really are, beyond the layers, beyond the masks, beyond the games. And then use that power, that Shakti, right? So goddesses are all about Shakti. We always hear the word Shakti. Use that Shakti to be blessed and to bless others. It's almost, to me, it's like an angelic way of living. Like, in more the Judeo-Christian or mostly Christian traditions, we would hear about how angels fly because they take themselves lightly, or angels, their feet don't really touch the ground, or when they descend from heaven, they don't get mucked up by the dirt on the street, right? So to be in bhakti, this is about entering into the transparent place of goodness, where the lower modes of anger or resentment or pride or possessiveness are not touching us. It's sort of like an angelic way of being above the ground and being transparent. What does it mean to be an angel? It means to be transparent to the will of God, right? The angels are messengers of divine grace. So I think that's very much about bhakti. And to me, that transcends boundaries. I love that you see the resonance in the writings of devotional saints of all traditions. But that idea to be transparent and to be able to understand what is that divine will, divine grace, and not share it as something coming from me, but to see myself as a messenger, as a transparent messenger. How can I share what I've received? It's all about receiving and sharing, and not about achieving and trampling others on the way to the top, right?
Oh, I love that. Yeah. And yeah, this softness, and I love the image of the angel in this angelic way, because it does, I think it, again, it lightens the load. I mean, we live in times that are very challenging right now. We could go through a long list of things that are challenging at the moment. So to embody and to, just do small acts, like acts of gratitude and offering small things, can really elevate us and help us to feel lighter in ourselves. And that's such a gift for those people who feel such burden and are really carrying so much. One thing that I remember from my studies of bhakti is that, whenever Radha kind of enters the room, or you could say the divine feminine enters the stage, she can basically that the divine masculine is just overcome by her. She can just give him a glance and he just melts. Or there's a saying from My Big Fat Greek Wedding, which is the man might be the head of the household, but the woman's the neck, and she can turn that head any way she wants.
That's right.
So
That's right.
So there's this, this acknowledgement in Bhakti of the power of the feminine. It's like the way that water can go over rocks, right? And just smooth out the surface of a rock over time. And I feel like, my husband says this a lot. He says, Bhakti, he's been practicing longer than I have. But he says, it's like water that this practice is really softening my rough edges.
That's so true. It's so funny. Yeah, my husband says the same kind of thing. That idea of being, in yoga, we hear about being in the flow, right? So being a river rock in that flow of, what is that flow? I'd say it's the flow of grace. And she is the guru of grace. She is the guru of divine love. And she's even Krishna's guru in the sense that she teaches him how to dance. He calls her, there's a name for Radha, that's Radha Swamini, that she is the guru of this kind of grace. So you have to be smoothed out like a river rock. The rocks on the bank, they're all rough and sharp, but being in that flow of grace, we become shiny and smooth. Mm-hmm. And that's also a metaphor for living in community or sharing in community. Maybe I live in my own house. My husband and I live in our own house. We're not living in an ashram somewhere, but to be able to feel like my heart is there and sharing in community. So by that give and take in community, we become shiny and we become smooth, and we learn how to, I'd say give more than take, and how to live in that flow of grace. And I think it's so important to also recognize that every living being, both the animals and the birds and the aquatics and the human beings and the earth herself is a goddess. That all living beings share that same spiritual essence, and that are, to really see the world in a mood of unity and diversity and honoring the differences. And I can learn so much. There's a beautiful quote from the Dalai Lama where he says that when I talk, I just repeat what I already know, but when I listen, I can learn something new. So just that idea that I have so much to learn from the different diverse voices that are there in our world, because Bhagavad Gita says that a wise person sees that same spiritual atma, that jivatma, that's the Sanskrit word for the soul, within every living being, within a dog, or within a wise person or a lowly person. So that same spiritual essence is there in every person of every color, of every culture. But we forget that in our sectarian divisions. And I think that's where the problems of the world come, when we forget that that same sacred spiritual essence is there. In the animals also, the animals will cry. If someone tries to harm an animal, the animal will run and cry. So what does that mean? It means that consciousness is there. And how to awaken that consciousness? This is the Bhakti is actually it's a cultivation. It's a practice. Some people translate the word Bhakti just as love. My guru translates Bhakti as loving service, because it's a cultivation. It's an active cultivation. And it's compared to a polishing of the heart. Like if you imagine the heart is like a mirror that's been so dusty, covered with grime and dust for so many lives, really, we could say. So to polish that heart is the cultivation, the chanting of God's name, the practice of these offering practices that we were talking about earlier. But what happens is then the heart becomes polished. And when that mirror of the heart is polished, then we can see ourselves for who we really are. We can see divinity, and we can see others for who they truly are, and see the world. So this is the cultivation, the practice, the polishing of Bhakti that I find so beautiful.
That is such a beautiful image. And yeah, I mean, I think so many spiritual paths say that, let it begin with me. How can I do my small part each day to cultivate this loving devotion inside of me? so that I can, that not only can I see myself and my divine nature, but be a reflective, be a source of light and reflection for other people to also see that.
So true. I think we suffer because we don't hear each other deeply. People feel unseen, unheard, unappreciated, and unloved. And if we can, reach out with a full heart that's full of this divine love that's overflowing. I love the metaphor of a fountain. A fountain has this overflowing water that's just overflowing, and the bowl of the fountain can be small, but then because that bowl is small, the water is overflowing. But if my possessiveness wants me to get more and more and more and more, then that fountain bowl becomes so huge, then that gratitude of overflowingness doesn't overflow. So to be able to be so full that I can reach out and appreciate others, and to be silent and hear, really deeply hear, really deeply see, to deeply hear, to deeply appreciate the gifts of in my life, the unseen gifts in my life, but the unseen gifts that others have to share also. And sometimes it's, that sense of wonder we talk about, that children have that sense of wonder. And so often we, big sophisticated adults, we're moving so fast, multitasking in 100 ways, and we don't pause to recognize those gifts. So I think Bhakti is very much about that pause and about that recognition of those gifts. My teacher would so beautifully say, so often he would be asked, are you seeing God? And he would be asked that in different ways, sometimes very sincerely, and sometimes in a sarcastic way. But once he was asked that in a very sincere way, and he said, you are also seeing God. Do you want to see God? And then he said, every day you see the sunrise, you see the moonrise, you're seeing God. So it's a matter of, I think, slowing down and recognizing with deep thanks. That's what I call Bhakti, the yoga of gratefulness. I think it's very important to recognize and pause and be thankful and often offer it back.
Yeah, I love as you're speaking, I'm imagining, and I think this is the gift that you give so beautifully is, as you're talking about seeing and feeling and slowing down, I'm seeing that ability that I have, even though, I have a little more polishing to do, quite a bit more polishing to do.
And I as well.
But I love that this idea of it being a practice, and I think many of us can feel a little overwhelmed because, we might get one of those a day, we might get one glimpse of divinity a day. So how might someone who's interested in cultivating more of this gratefulness, we talked about some ideas of offering things, but are there any other, daily practices that one might take up to help cultivate this mood in their daily lives?
Yeah, that's beautiful. To be able to say the holy name of God, that's also celebrated in, I think, every religious tradition of the world. The name of God, what does it say in the Psalms? Praise be the name of God from the time the sun rises till the time the sun sets. Praise the name of God with loud cymbals and drums. And, chanting the name of God. On the path of Bhakti, we chant the Hare Krishna mantra, which is actually, it's called a Jugala mantra, which means a conjugal loving mantra, because it's completely made up of the names of the sacred feminine and the sacred masculine. So I'll just say this mantra for you. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So this Hare refers to Radha. It refers to the sacred energy, the sacred feminine, the sacred divine feminine, Radha, or Hara is a name for Radha. And Krishna means all attractive person. And then there are different translations of the word Rama. But you could say Rama means the enjoyer of Radha. So that mantra is just a loving exchange between the divine feminine and the divine masculine. We chant that mantra on beads quietly as a solitary meditation. Maybe sometime on one of these podcasts we could show how to do that. We also sing it. So that's a nice dancing celebration to sing that mantra, or so many other beautiful bhajans or songs in celebration with loud cymbals and drums and guitars and all kinds of things, whatever instruments you love. We have a dear friend, Jaisita. She lives in Puerto Rico. She plays cello. When my son Gauravani does kirtan very often, she'll be showing up with her big, beautiful cello. My granddaughter Revati plays violin in kirtan. So kirtan means this joyous, celebratory singing of sacred names. So that's one practice that's very, very important. And to find like-minded people on the spiritual path, because we're social beings, and it's very hard to do a practice of bhakti in isolation. But of course, the whole world is on Zoom now, so we can be tuning into Africa or France or anywhere, New York or California. So this is one of the, you could maybe say it's been a grace of the COVID pandemic that we can, just like you right now, you're in Minnesota and I'm in suburban Washington, D.C., and we can have this conversation. But find like-minded association, because talk about mirrors. Whatever we put in front of us, we tend to reflect. And we don't want that big shadow side of ourselves to be reflected. We want that bright and light and illumined, authentic self to be uplifted and to shine forward. So try to find someone who's not going to drag you down. Try to find a little circle of women, or sometimes men. Sometimes men have a more awakened feminine side than some of the ladies, So, we shouldn't be sectarian about that, but try to find like-minded friendship that you can gather together either on Zoom or in your house or in a gathering place. And we read Bhagavad Gita as we read the sacred Bhagavad Gita, which is a conversation between Krishna and his devotee Arjuna. And we study Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavat Purana. So these are wonderful practices that can help sharpen that sword of divine consciousness, so that we can act in the world with power, with using our gifts in divine ways, like a messenger angel. So.
I love that. And you started you started a group called Urban Devi that's based out of the Bhakti Center in New York City. Can you tell our listeners a little bit more about this place and how this might be a place that a lot of listeners could go to and maybe find community there. So what kind of offerings will they find?
Yeah, Urban Devi. So Urban Devi, since the COVID pandemic, we've been meeting once a month online over Zoom, and women are tuning in from all over the world once a month. The next one is going to be January 30th. And if you go to urbandevi.com, you can also join our Urban Devi WhatsApp group and get the postings. But on January 30th, a very dear sister of mine will be speaking about her adventures in Russia. And actually, she's in Russia. She's French, but she's in Russia right now. And we have different teachers from different places of the world, wise women who have beautiful gifts to share. So Bhakti Center is also, if you're anywhere near New York City, please visit the Bhakti Center. They have a beautiful Thursday night kirtan. Kirtan is this call and response chanting of God's names. And so that's on Thursday nights. And they have other small discussion groups that happen through Bhakti Center. They have a group on Wednesday nights called In Spirit, which is about transitions in life. So many beautiful offerings. You can go to bhakticenter.org also. Bhakti Center, I think it's bhakticenternyc.org. And then, we have urbandevi.com, and I'm at Rukmini Walker at Facebook also. And you can find our offerings. We post poems, we post art, we post blogs, and any offerings you'd like to share with us, we'd be very interested to see also. With your realizations or your questions or your thoughts on the Bhakti path also.
Wonderful. Yeah. And one more resource is Rukmini herself. You can support Rukmini on her Patreon page. And it's posted right here under her name, patreon.com/Rukmini Walker. And if you, any amount that you can support Rukmini's work will go towards all of the projects that she funds and works on. And you'll get access to her writings. I love when you post your musings where, just something that inspires you for the day. Maybe it comes from a line of a poem or just something that's welling from deep within you. You'll share these. And so as a Patreon supporter, we get these updates to our inbox, and we also get access to the Krishna book community, which has been really for me a lifeline to my Sangha or my spiritual community. And so we meet on Wednesday nights, and we are right now looking at the Krishna book and these wonderful stories of Krishna and Radha and romance and suspense. And it's just wonderful. And, we all have an opportunity. Rukmini holds space so that we can all reflect on what we've heard and apply it to our own lives, or, share with the group our takeaways. And I feel like that just, it really gives each individual a chance to deepen their own, their own practice of reflection and taking in the spiritual nectar. So, for those of you that want to that are looking for Sangha, and, Wednesday nights are an option for you, you may want to do that as well.
Wonderful. Yeah, a lot of the folks who joined that Wednesday night Sangha are based at an eco-village in Puerto Rico. You might want to check this out also. It's called Plenitud, which is spelled the Spanish way, Plenitud, plenitudepr.org. So they have a lovely eco-village where they're teaching so many beautiful things, straw bale housing, and they have university groups that come and visit, and they're distributing sacred food to elderly people in the whole greater area and teaching children about vegetarianism. And now they have a lovely new cow named Rinda. So those are the folks that you'll meet if you join us on Wednesday nights. And that's a very, very open invitation to all of you to please join us at our Krishna book discussions on Wednesday nights.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Rukmini. This has been such a wonderful conversation. And again, I just really feel like the conversation, just opening it and having it be really inclusive, and it's not just, it's not just for men, it's not just for women. This is really a path and a conversation that I think could benefit so many people right now. And my hope is that, in the conversations to follow, we have 4 more planned. Who knows where it will go, but we'll be able to share, like Rukmini said, more of the tangible everyday practices, maybe share some of the scriptures and the deep meaning and teachings of these, looking at a little bit more specifically this, the intimate dance between Krishna and Radha, and the masculine and the feminine, and how that plays. And for me, that's been so helpful in my marriage, just to be frank, like, how does the feminine and masculine, how do they play off of each other? And how do we create sacred relationships with our partners, whether it's 2 women or 2 men, but just that honoring that divine feminine spark and masculine spark in each person. So I hope, we'll just continue to flush out this conversation. And if you have more topics you'd like us to speak on, you can post those in the comments section. We'd be happy to, take your questions as well. I think at the very end of the series, we're going to have a whole question and answer series or portion where we'll just be answering questions that you all have.
Wonderful.
Yeah, so I will post all of the links to Rukmini's Patreon, to the Facebook page that she runs, where you can get, more current updates, to Urban Devi, to the Bhakti Center, to Plentitude. So look for all of those links in the description of this talk. And for those of you who are listening to this before the end of the year, the end of 2021, my husband's work with Nightlight Astrology, we're fundraising right now to raise money to support Urban Devi. So any contributions that you give, you can receive a reading for the year ahead, an astrology reading for the year ahead, or purchase an astrology course. And all of this money is going to go towards scholarships, funding projects. I'm building an herbal garden that I'm going to use for my community teaching of plant spirits as angelic and, plants as spiritual beings. And also we'll be donating money to Urban Devi to fund all of their wonderful projects and offerings. So if you do have a little extra this year and you can donate, I'll post a link also to the Kickstarter where you can make that donation. So thank you again, Rukmini. Just a pleasure to sit with you today.
Thank you, Ashley. What a joy. So all blessings and prayers for you in the coming year, in the coming days of this year. And thank you for inviting me to share this conversation with you.
Oh, thank you. And blessings to you as well. All right. Bye, everyone. Thanks for listening.